The palace of Queen Cyril stood like a mountain of stone and crystal, high above the city of her empire. Its walls shone under the twin suns, and its gates were guarded by warriors from across the stars. Among them stood a single human guard, a young man named Ryan. He was not as tall as the scaled warriors of the south, nor as strong as the horned soldiers of the northern clans. He carried no shining armor or heavy weapon. His uniform was simple, and his weapon was only a staff made of reinforced steel. Yet he held his post with steady eyes and quiet strength. Ryan was often ignored by the others. The alien soldiers looked at him with a kind of hidden smile, as if his presence was nothing more than decoration. To them, a human among the royal guard was almost a joke. Some whispered that he was only there because the queen wanted to show kindness to the weaker races of the empire. When he walked through the halls, many looked past him, never expecting him to do more than stand still and follow orders. But Ryan was different from what they believed. He did not speak much, but he observed everything. His eyes moved like the sweep of a scanner, catching every small detail that others missed. He could tell when the energy lights in the ceiling flickered, or when a servant left a hallway too quickly. He knew which soldier favored his left leg when standing still, and which advisor spoke too softly when giving a report. The palace was full of sound and movement, but to Ryan it was a map, and every piece of that map had meaning. Each day, he rose early and trained in silence. He practiced with his staff, moving it through the air until it became a blur. The weapon looked simple, but in his hands it was an extension of his body. He drilled his steps across the marble floor, teaching himself balance and speed. No alien commander had taught him. He had learned by watching, listening, and repeating until every motion became part of his memory. Though his body was not as powerful as the armored beasts that guarded the gates, his patience and focus gave him an edge they did not see. He did not waste his strength, nor did he boast of his skills. He simply kept watch, always alert. The throne chamber was where he spent most of his hours. It was a vast hall, lit by tall crystals that glowed with natural light from beneath the floor. At the far end sat Queen Cyril on her throne of silver stone. She was taller than any human, her skin marked with faint patterns that shone under the light. Her voice carried across the hall with power, and her word was law. Courtiers and advisors filled the chamber each day, bringing reports from distant worlds and offering counsel on wars, trade, and politics. Ryan stood near the edge of the throne's platform, silent as stone. He watched every step, every face, every hand that moved too quickly or too slowly. He knew his duty was simple, guard the queen. But in his heart, he believed it meant more. To guard her was not only to block danger with his staff. It was to see danger before it arrived, to feel it in the air and recognize it in the smallest change of sound or light. Sometimes, when the court grew noisy, the queen's eyes would pass over him. She would not speak to him, but she saw him standing there. For a moment, her gaze would linger, as if she wondered why this human never faltered. Then she would return her attention to the affairs of the empire, and Ryan would go on unnoticed. At night, when the palace grew quiet, Ryan walked the halls alone. The alien guards preferred to gather in groups, speaking loudly or resting in their quarters. But Ryan moved like a shadow, checking each door and window, listening to the hum of the energy lines that fed the palace. He noticed when the sound shifted, even slightly. He noticed when dust collected where it should not, or when a servant's step was too heavy. To him, these were signs, pieces of a puzzle that others could not see. Though he was often treated as weak, Ryan carried no anger in his heart. He understood why the others doubted him. He was not made of thick muscle or covered in armor. He did not have claws, wings, or horns. But he had something else. He had patience, discipline, and the will to stand alone if needed. That was enough for him. One evening, as the suns lowered and the light turned red across the palace, Ryan stood at his post. The advisors were leaving the chamber, their voices fading down the corridors. The queen remained on her throne, silent and deep in thought. Ryan shifted his staff and looked across the room, his eyes falling on the farthest doorway. For just a moment, he thought he saw movement there, something too quick and too small to belong to a servant. He did not react. He did not move. He only watched, marking the shadow in his memory. Others might have ignored it, but Ryan never ignored anything. His duty was simple, and he would not fail it. Whatever that shadow was, he would remember it. The palace was vast, the empire even greater, and Queen Cyril ruled over them all. But in that hall, with his staff in hand and his eyes steady, Ryan stood guard. He was only one human among countless aliens, yet his watchful gaze would soon matter more than any blade or shield in the empire. The next day began with noise and tension inside the palace. Rumors had spread through the halls that something had gone wrong in the outer sectors. Messengers hurried in and out of the throne chamber, their robes brushing against the polished floors. Advisors spoke in sharp voices, each one trying to be louder than the others. The queen sat high upon her throne, her eyes cold as she listened to their reports. A spy had entered the palace walls during the night. No one knew how. No one knew why. But some damage had already been discovered. A storage hall had been breached, and fragments of crystal energy were missing. Though no explosion had occurred, the theft alone was dangerous. Those crystals were used to power the palace defense systems. If they were misused, they could weaken the very shield that protected the queen's throne. The queen's anger filled the chamber. Her voice cut through the advisors, silencing them with a single word. She demanded to know who had allowed this to happen. The guards shifted uneasily, their armor clinking as they bowed their heads. No one wanted to answer. No one wanted to carry blame. Ryan stood at his post near the edge of the throne's platform. His eyes moved calmly across the hall, watching the advisors and guards. He had not slept much. The shadow he had seen the night before was still fresh in his mind. He remembered the quick movement, the way it slipped into the far doorway. He had thought it too small to be a servant and too quick to be a guard. In his heart, he knew the spy had passed through that door. When the queen demanded answers again, Ryan stepped forward. His voice was steady, though not loud. He told her what he had seen. He explained that during the evening, a shadow had moved through the far doorway of the chamber. He described how the step was light, too light for any soldier, and how the figure moved with purpose, not like a servant on daily duty. The hall grew silent. The alien guards turned their eyes to him. The advisors looked at each other and then back at the queen. For a long moment, nothing was said. Then, one of the scaled warriors let out a sharp laugh. He mocked the human, saying his eyes played tricks on him. Another advisor claimed humans were known for imagination, not accuracy. A third accused Ryan of inventing a story to protect himself from blame. Queen Cyril listened to all of this without speaking. Her sharp eyes stayed fixed on Ryan. She had never trusted the human fully, though she had allowed him to stand among her guard. Now, when her empire's safety had been tested, he came forward with only a story about a shadow. To her, it felt weak, almost insulting. She rose from her throne. The hall went silent again. In a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber, she declared that Ryan had failed in his duty. He was the closest guard to the throne, and yet he allowed a spy to enter and escape. His excuse of seeing a shadow was not enough. A true soldier would have acted at once. A true soldier would have stopped the intruder before any theft could occur. The words struck Ryan like heavy stones, but he did not speak back. He lowered his head, gripping his staff more tightly. Around him, the alien guards smirked, and the advisors nodded as if the queen's judgment was final and true. Queen Cyril continued, her voice sharp as a blade. She told Ryan that his presence among the royal guard was a mistake. She ordered him removed from his post. The staff was taken from his hands, and his uniform was stripped of its crest. He was no longer a protector of the throne. The guards stepped forward to escort him out. As they led him through the hall, Laughter followed him. The advisors shook their heads, some with pity, others with amusement. The alien soldiers whispered to each other, calling him weak and unworthy. Ryan did not reply. He kept his head low, his steps quiet, and his eyes calm. But inside, he felt no shame. He knew what he had seen. The shadow was real. The movement was real. He had not imagined it, and he would not forget it. When the doors of the throne chamber closed behind him, the noise of the court faded away. The guards left him in the outer hall, turning back to their duties. Ryan stood alone, his hands empty, his uniform plain. To the Empire, he was now nothing more than another servant, a failed human who could not hold his place. Yet as he walked slowly down the corridor, his mind was sharp. He remembered every detail of the night before. He remembered the sound of the light step, the faint flicker of energy in the walls, the way the shadow moved with purpose. These were not lies. These were clues. And if the Queen would not believe him, then he would follow the trail alone. The palace around him was still filled with voices and movement, but Ryan walked with silent determination. He was no longer a guard in name, yet in his heart he had not abandoned his duty. The Queen had cast him aside, but she was still in danger. The Empire was still at risk. As the suns dipped lower and the palace shadows grew longer, Ryan prepared himself. Others could laugh. Others could doubt. But he would seek the truth, and when he found it, they would all know the human had not failed. The corridors of the palace stretched endlessly, filled with shining walls and polished stone. Servants moved quietly through them, carrying trays or scrolls, but no one paid attention to the human who now walked without crest or title. Ryan's steps were steady. His uniform no longer carried the mark of the guard, yet he still moved with the same sense of duty. He remembered the Queen's judgment, her harsh words, and the laughter of the alien guards. But none of it shook his mind. He had seen the shadow, and he knew it was not imagination. If he could not serve as an official guard, then he would still serve in silence. The Queen had dismissed him, but he could not dismiss his own eyes. That night, when the palace grew quiet and the halls emptied, Ryan began his search. He returned to the throne chamber, not through the main entrance where soldiers stood, but through narrow passages used only by servants. He knew these paths well. His years of standing watch had taught him every corner of the palace, every shortcut hidden behind panels or stairways. The chamber was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the floor crystals. Ryan stood at the edge, letting his eyes adjust. Then he walked toward the far doorway, the same place where the shadow had slipped the night before. He knelt near the floor, running his hand across the smooth stone. At first, it seemed clean, but when he leaned closer, he saw it. A faint mark. It was small, almost invisible, as if someone had dragged a sharp edge across the stone. The mark curved slightly, like the cut of a tool carried too quickly. No alien guard would have noticed it, not in the dim light, not with their heavy steps. But Ryan's eyes caught it at once. He followed the mark, crawling along the floor to trace its path. It led through the doorway, down a side corridor, and into a narrow stairwell that twisted beneath the palace. The air grew cooler there, and the sound of the upper halls faded. Few came this way. It was a place for pipes, storage, and old machinery that kept the palace running. As he moved deeper, he noticed more signs. A scuff on the wall where someone had brushed against it. A faint drop of oil on the floor where none should be. A strand of cloth caught on a sharp corner of stone. To most eyes, these were nothing. To Ryan, they were a trail. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from focus. The intruder had passed this way. The path was clear to him, though hidden from everyone else. Step by step, he followed it downward. The stairwell opened into a large chamber filled with humming machines. Pipes ran along the walls, carrying energy from the palace's power core. The glow of blue light pulsed through them, steady and calm. At first glance, Everything seemed normal. But Ryan's gaze caught something strange near the center of the room. One of the panels on the wall was loose. Its edges were marked by fresh scratches, as if it had been opened recently. He stepped closer, crouching to look. Inside the panel, wires and crystals glimmered faintly. But among them lay something else, something that did not belong. It was a small device, dark and cold, hidden behind the crystals. Wires stretched from it, feeding into the palace's energy lines. Ryan stared at it, his breath heavy. This was no ordinary tool. It was not a servant's mistake. It was a sabotage device, carefully planted to draw power from the palace itself. He leaned closer, studying it without touching. The shape was strange, the design foreign. It pulsed faintly, as if waiting for a command. His instincts told him it was dangerous, perhaps even able to damage the core of the palace if activated. Ryan stepped back, his mind racing. This was the truth he had been searching for. The spy had not only stolen energy crystals. The spy had also planted something far worse. If this device continued to feed on the palace's power, the shields could collapse, or worse, the core could overload. He thought of returning to the throne chamber, of telling the queen what he had found. But he remembered her words, sharp as blades, and the way she had looked at him with cold eyes. She had cast him aside before the entire court. If he came again with nothing but claims, would she even listen? Or would she order him thrown out of the palace altogether? Ryan's hand tightened into a fist. He could not turn away. The queen might not believe him, but the evidence was here, hidden beneath the palace. If he failed to act, the empire itself could fall. He crouched again, studying the device. The markings on its surface pulsed in rhythm, almost like breathing. He had never seen such technology before, but he had studied enough machines to recognize a dangerous design. This was no simple trap. It was a weapon, patient and silent, waiting for the right moment. The faint sound of footsteps echoed down the stairwell, and Ryan froze. His eyes narrowed, his body still. The sound was soft, but it was there, someone else was in the chamber. Slowly, he moved back into the shadows, keeping low behind the pipes. A figure entered, cloaked in dark fabric. The intruder moved straight to the panel, checking the device as if it were a routine task. The figure's movements were precise, confident. Ryan's heart pounded as he watched. His suspicion had been right. The spy was real, and the danger was greater than anyone knew. He wanted to step forward, to strike with his bare hands, but he stopped himself. To act now would be reckless. The intruder was armed, and Ryan had no weapon. More than that, if he failed, the spy would know he had been discovered. So he remained silent, memorizing every detail: the height of the figure, the way they moved, the tools they carried. He stored each piece of knowledge in his mind. When the intruder finished checking the device and vanished back into the stairwell, Ryan let out a slow breath. Alone again, he stood before the humming machines. The truth was clear. The Empire was under silent attack, and he was the only one who had seen it. The palace above slept in silence, but deep below its shining halls, Ryan stood with a racing heart. The hum of the machines surrounded him, steady and calm, yet he knew danger pulsed within them. The strange device hidden inside the panel was not just a tool. It was a weapon. Its dark wires and faint rhythm spoke of a silent trap waiting to spring. He thought of the intruder he had seen. The figure had checked the device with skill, as if they had done it many times before. That meant the spy was no simple thief. This was part of a larger plan, one that reached beyond a stolen crystal. If left alone, the palace itself could fall. Ryan leaned against the wall, his mind heavy with thought. Should he go to the queen at once? Should he tell her what he had found? The memory of her harsh judgment pressed against him like a weight. She had dismissed his warning before, and the entire court had laughed at him. If he returned with another claim, she might order him thrown out completely, or worse, silence him forever for wasting her time. But the risk of saying nothing was greater. The device was real. The threat was real. And if he ignored it, thousands in the palace could be lost, including the queen herself. Ryan took a deep breath and began to plan. He could not simply speak. He needed proof. He would return with something solid, something no one could deny. His sharp eyes searched the chamber again, tracing every corner. The intruder had been careful, but not perfect. A faint line of dust had been brushed aside near the panel. A mark of a tool scratched the floor. Ryan memorized it all. He moved carefully, examining the panel again. The device pulsed faintly, a sign that it was active. He wanted to tear it out and carry it to the throne chamber, but he stopped himself. Tampering with something he did not fully understand could trigger it early. A single wrong move might bring down the machines around him. Instead, he studied the pattern of its glow. It was steady, almost like a heartbeat. He counted the rhythm, storing it in his mind. The intruder had checked it, which meant the spy was ensuring it was still functioning. That meant there was time. But how much? A day, a week, or less? The thought made his chest tighten. He left the chamber quietly, moving like a shadow through the stairwells. When he returned to the upper halls, the palace was quiet. Guards patrolled lazily, their armor clinking as they joked with each other. None of them knew what danger rested beneath their feet. None of them cared. To them, the palace walls were unbreakable, and the queen untouchable. Ryan slipped past them unseen. He returned to his quarters, a small, plain room now stripped of honor. His staff was gone, his crest taken. On the table lay only a small lamp and a piece of cloth. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. His heart wanted to rest, but his mind refused. He thought of the queen again. Cyril, ruler of the empire, proud and unbending. She had called him weak, had cast him aside. Yet he still cared for her safety. Not because of her words or her throne, but because she carried the weight of so many lives. If she fell, the empire would fall with her, and countless worlds would burn in chaos. That night, he did not sleep. He rose before the first light of dawn and returned to the hidden passages. He followed the trails again, double-checking every mark, every clue. The spy had left signs that others ignored. To the alien soldiers, these details were too small, but to Ryan, they spoke loudly. By the time the palace began to stir with morning noise, he had a clearer picture in his mind. The intruder was skilled, yes, but they were not a ghost. They had a path, a purpose, and a routine. They had entered through the throne chamber, moved through the lower passages, and returned again to check the device. That meant they would return once more. Ryan decided then. He would not only report. He would catch the intruder himself. The thought filled him with quiet strength. He had no staff, no crest, no armor, but he had his patience, his sharp eyes, and his will. He would wait for the spy. He would gather proof with his own hands, and only then would he stand before the queen again. As the suns rose higher, the palace filled with sound. Advisors gathered in the throne chamber, guards patrolled in shining armor, and the queen sat upon her throne, her expression cold and proud. None of them saw the storm building beneath their feet. Ryan returned to the lower chambers once more. He crouched behind the machines, his body still as stone. Hours passed, the hum of the palace core steady in his ears. His legs grew tired, but he did not move. His mind was sharp, fixed on the memory of the intruder's steps. At last, faint footsteps echoed down the stairwell again. Ryan's breath slowed, his heart steady. The shadow returned, moving with the same confidence, the same careful speed. The figure went to the panel, crouched, and checked the device once more. Ryan's eyes narrowed. This was his chance. But he did not move yet. Not tonight. He waited, storing every detail, letting the spy believe they were unseen. He knew now that the threat was not only real but growing. The device was alive, and the intruder was watching it closely. When the figure vanished again into the stairwell, Ryan rose from the shadows. His decision was made. The danger was greater than he had feared, and waiting too long could cost everything. He would go to the Queen, no matter the risk. Whether she believed him or not, he would speak. The fate of the palace depended on it. The throne chamber was alive with voices. Advisors crowded around the Queen, speaking of trade routes, distant wars, and new taxes for the Empire's subjects. The guards lined the walls, their armor polished, their weapons gleaming under the glow of the tall crystal lights. Queen Cyril sat upon her throne, her face cold, her gaze sharp. To most who looked at her, she seemed untouchable, unshaken by fear or doubt. But to Ryan, who walked into the chamber with quiet steps, there was no time for politics. His heart carried only one truth. Beneath the palace, a hidden device waited like a silent blade. And the spy who had planted it still walked freely among them. The murmur of voices faltered when the court noticed him. The human who had been cast out now stood at the center of the hall once more. Guards shifted uneasily, their eyes narrowing. Advisors exchanged glances of surprise and annoyance. One of the scaled soldiers gave a low laugh, whispering to the one beside him. Queen Cyril's gaze fell on him, cold and sharp. "You dare to stand here again, human?" Her voice echoed across the chamber. Ryan did not lower his head this time. His voice was steady, calm, but filled with weight. "I come because the danger is greater than you believe. The palace is not safe. A device has been placed within its core, hidden behind the energy lines. It feeds on the palace power even now." The chamber fell into a hush. Then laughter broke out among some of the advisors. "Again he speaks of shadows," one muttered. "Perhaps he dreams too much." Another added, "He is no longer a guard. Why should we listen to him?" Ryan ignored them. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the Queen. "I saw the intruder with my own eyes. I followed the trail into the lower chambers. The device is real, and it grows stronger each day. If nothing is done, the palace will fall, and with it, the Empire itself." The guards moved closer, their spears crossed to block his path. Yet Ryan stood firm. His voice did not waver. "If I speak false, then search the chamber I name. Go below the throne, follow the stairwell to the machines, and you will see. If I lie, cast me from the Empire. But if I speak truth, you will know the human you judged weak was the only one who kept his eyes open." The advisors hissed and shook their heads, but Queen Cyril raised her hand, and silence returned. Her sharp gaze lingered on him. For a moment, the chamber felt frozen. Then she turned to one of her generals. "Send a squad. Search the chamber he speaks of. Bring me proof." The guards marched out at once, their heavy armor clattering. The court waited, restless, voices whispering like wind through stone. Ryan remained in place, silent, his heart steady but heavy. He had spoken. Now all depended on the truth being seen with their own eyes. Time moved slowly. Each breath felt long. The Queen said nothing, her gaze fixed on him as though weighing his soul. At last, the guards returned. In their hands they carried a strange object, pulsing faintly with light. Gasps spread across the hall. The alien device was real. Its wires glimmered with energy, and its rhythm beat like a slow heart. The chamber erupted in noise. Advisors shouted in alarm. Guards drew back in unease. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she stared at the device. "So it is true," she said softly, though her voice carried weight enough to silence all others. One advisor stammered, "But how could he see this, when all of us saw nothing?" Ryan lifted his chin, his voice calm. "Because I watch what others ignore. I listen when others dismiss. To guard the Queen is not only to stand with a weapon. It is to see what others will not. That is what it means to protect. The queen's gaze held his for a long moment. Pride had always been her shield, yet now it faltered. Before the entire court, she had shamed him once. Now, before the same court, his words had saved them all. But the danger was not ended. The device pulsed in the guard's hands, its glow stronger with every beat. The general frowned. We cannot disarm it. Its design is unknown. If we strike it, it may explode. Fear spread again. The advisors pressed back, whispering in panic. Even the soldiers shifted uneasily. But Ryan stepped forward. His eyes had studied the rhythm of the machine, the pattern of its pulse. He had memorized it during the long hours in the lower chamber. Give it to me, he said. The guards hesitated. A human with no title, no crest, asking to touch the very heart of danger. But the queen raised her hand again. Let him. The device was placed before Ryan. He knelt, studying it closely. The glow flickered in the same rhythm he had counted before. His fingers brushed the surface, careful and steady. He traced the lines of its design, watching how the energy flowed. Slowly, he began to pull the wires free, one by one, following the pattern he had memorized. The chamber held its breath. Each pull could have been the last. Sweat beaded on his brow, but his hands did not shake. He had no weapon, no armor, but his patience was his strength, and patience guided his touch. At last, the final pulse slowed. The glow faded, the rhythm stopped. The device lay silent in his hands. The danger was ended. A heavy silence filled the hall. Then, slowly, the whispers began. No one laughed now. No one doubted. The human who had been cast out had saved the palace with his own hands. Queen Cyril looked down at him, her face unreadable. For the first time, her pride was not a shield but a weight. She had judged him harshly, yet he had stood firm when no one else could. Ryan placed the silent device on the floor. He rose and stood tall, not as a broken guard, but as one who had fulfilled his duty. The chamber of aliens, filled with warriors and leaders from across the stars, looked upon a human with new eyes. The device lay silent on the floor of the throne chamber. Its faint glow was gone, its heartbeat stilled by Ryan's steady hands. For a long moment, the great hall was quiet. No advisor spoke, no soldier moved. All eyes were fixed on the human who had once been dismissed as weak. Queen Cyril sat still upon her throne, her gaze fixed on him. The silence around her was heavy, almost uneasy. She had always ruled with strength, never allowing herself to be questioned. Yet here stood the man she had cast aside, saving her empire when no one else could. One of the generals broke the silence. We cannot know if this was the only device. There may be more hidden across the palace. His deep voice carried across the hall. If that is true, then we remain in danger. The words struck the court like a spark. Advisors whispered in alarm, soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Ryan, however, did not join the panic. He looked calmly at the device, then lifted his gaze to the queen. It is not alone, he said quietly. The intruder placed it with purpose. If they dared to plant this within the palace core, they may have planted others. And they will return. I saw them myself. The court erupted again, voices clashing. Some demanded tighter security. Others insisted the human be questioned further. A few, still bitter with pride, claimed he might have been the one to plant it, though the device in his hands proved otherwise. Queen Cyril raised her hand, and silence fell once more. Her eyes rested on Ryan, and for the first time, her expression softened, if only slightly. You claim there are more. Can you find them? Ryan did not hesitate. Yes. The chamber stirred at his answer. To most, it sounded impossible. Yet the queen did not doubt him immediately. She studied him in silence before giving a single nod. Then you will lead. Those words shocked the hall more than anything. A human, stripped of rank, cast out as unworthy, now placed above generals and advisors? Some advisors began to protest, but Cyril silenced them with a glare. None among you saw what he saw. None among you acted when danger lay at your feet. He will lead, and you will follow. Ryan felt the weight of her words, but he accepted it without pride. He did not serve for glory or honor. He served because it was right. That night, he returned to the lower chambers, this time not alone. A squad of guards followed him, though uneasily. They did not trust him fully, but they obeyed the Queen's order. Their armor clinked softly in the narrow stairwells, their spears ready. Ryan moved ahead of them, his steps silent, his eyes scanning every wall, every mark. He followed the signs again, the faint scratches, the disturbed dust, the smallest details others ignored. His mind was sharp, focused on the memory of the spy. At last, in another chamber near the palace's shield generators, he found it. Another panel loose, another strange glow hidden behind the wires. The device pulsed in the same rhythm as before. The guards muttered in alarm, their eyes wide. Without Ryan, they would never have noticed it. Again he worked, his hands calm, his breath steady. The guards watched in silence as he disabled the device piece by piece. When it went dark, their fear eased, though only slightly. They understood now. The human was no fool, no weakling. He was their protector. But Ryan knew it was not enough. If there were two, there could be more. And if there were more, time was running short. The following day, the Queen summoned him again. The devices had shaken even her strong heart. She looked at him with eyes that carried both pride and regret. You risked your life to disarm what none of my soldiers could even see. Yet you still walk without weapon, without rank. Why? Ryan bowed his head. Because my duty was never the crest or the staff. My duty was to protect. If the empire falls, titles mean nothing. If it stands, then my work is done. His words lingered in the air. The court was silent, no one daring to laugh or mock him now. Queen Cyril's expression shifted, her pride cracking for just a moment. In that moment, she saw clearly what she had ignored. The human she had judged unworthy had done more for her empire than any of her proudest warriors. But before she could speak further, a messenger rushed into the chamber, breathless with fear. Another pulse, he cried. The shields flicker. The city feels it. More devices remain. The Queen rose from her throne. Her voice carried power, though it trembled beneath the surface. Then we must find them before it is too late. She turned to Ryan, her sharp gaze steady. You have done what no one else could. The empire now depends on you. The weight of her words pressed upon him, yet Ryan felt no fear. He only nodded. Then I will finish what I began. That night, as darkness settled over the palace and the twin suns vanished beyond the horizon, Ryan stood once more in the lower halls. The hum of the palace core surrounded him, steady but fragile. Somewhere in the shadows, more devices waited, and the spy who had placed them would not stop until their work was complete. The choice was no longer the Queen's alone. It was his. He had chosen to serve, even when stripped of title, even when shamed. Now that choice carried the weight of the empire itself. And he would not fail. The night was heavy inside the palace. Shadows stretched across the long stone halls, and the air was thick with silence. The shields of the empire flickered again, and every soldier knew that danger waited in the dark. Ryan walked at the front of a small group of guards. His steps were steady, his eyes sharp. He had found 2 hidden devices already, but the spy was still free. Somewhere in the palace, more traps waited, and the empire was only breaths away from ruin. The guards who once mocked him now followed without question. Their pride was replaced by respect, though none of them dared speak it aloud. The truth was plain to see: this human had saved them when no one else could. Ryan stopped in a narrow chamber near the base of the palace walls. He touched the cold stone, feeling for the faint marks others would miss. His voice was calm. Here. Look closely. The wall has been moved. The guards leaned in, and indeed, the lines of the stone were not natural. Something had been shifted and then replaced. Ryan pressed carefully, and the block loosened. Behind it lay another device, pulsing faintly with dangerous light. Without hesitation, he set to work. The guards held their breath as he cut the wires one by one. At last, the light faded, and the chamber grew quiet once more. But even as relief washed over them, a sharp sound echoed through the hall. Footsteps, fast and light. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He knew at once it was the spy. Stay here, he told the guards. Then he moved swiftly into the shadows, following the sound. The chase was silent but fierce. Through narrow halls and steep stairwells, Ryan pursued the intruder. At last, in a wide chamber lit by dim torches, the spy turned. A figure wrapped in dark cloth, face hidden, eyes gleaming. You should not have stopped me, the intruder hissed. This empire was meant to fall. Ryan did not raise a weapon, for he carried none. His voice was calm. It will not fall tonight. Not while I still stand. The intruder lunged, but Ryan was ready. He sidestepped, used his strength, and struck with precision. The fight was quick but brutal. The spy moved with speed, but Ryan moved with purpose. In the end, the intruder fell, bound by ropes pulled from the chamber itself. When the guards arrived, they found the human standing tall over the captured spy. None spoke against him now. The following morning, the queen summoned Ryan to the throne room. The captured intruder knelt in chains before her, silent and bitter. Advisors and generals lined the chamber, waiting for her judgment. But Queen Cyril's eyes were fixed on Ryan. You have saved this empire not once, but many times, she said, her voice steady but filled with weight. You saw what none of us could see. You acted when all others failed. And you did so after I cast you aside. The court was silent, the truth heavy in the air. She stood from her throne, her tall form towering above all, yet her voice was softer than ever before. I wronged you, Ryan. I judged you unworthy. I treated you with harshness and doubt. And now, when my empire stands only because of you, I see the depth of my mistake. Ryan bowed his head. I did only what was right. No more. But the queen's voice carried more than duty now. You gave more than duty. You gave loyalty when none was returned. You gave strength when none believed in you. That truth is mine to carry, and it is a regret I will bear forever. Her words echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, her court saw not only the strength of their queen but also her humility. She stepped down from her throne, an act no one had ever seen. Standing before the human guard, she lowered her head in respect. The empire owes you more than honor. It owes you its life. And she paused, her voice heavy, I owe you my apology. The hall was still. Even the chains of the spy seemed quiet. The generals and advisors looked on in awe, for the queen had never bowed her pride to anyone. Ryan's answer was simple. Then let the empire stand, and let no more be lost. The queen lifted her head slowly, her eyes meeting his. In them burned both respect and sorrow. She knew she could never undo the pain she had caused him, nor erase the harshness she had shown. But she could remember, and she could change. From that day forward, the human who had once been cast aside was no longer a forgotten guard. He was the protector of the palace, the one who had seen what others could not. His name was spoken with respect in every corner of the empire. And for Queen Cyril, the memory remained. Each time she walked her throne room, each time she looked upon her people, she remembered the moment she nearly lost everything because of her pride. She remembered the human who saved her and the truth that carved its mark upon her heart. It was a truth she carried not as a ruler, but as one who had learned the price of underestimating the smallest flame. For sometimes, it was the flame no one believed in that kept the darkness away. And though her empire stood strong, the queen knew one thing would remain forever. Her regret.